great character, probably the best part of the film. Everything else is trash, but besides that. So
I mean,
go ahead,
I
Andrew.
would take that honestly if that's Maverick's take.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of A Lost Plot, the podcast by storytellers for storytellers so that we can tell better stories ourselves. As always, I'm your host, Maverick, and today we have back with us our two favorite co-hosts, Avalon and Andrew, to review the second in the Captain America series, Captain America, the Winter Soldier. This was a 2014 American superhero film with the screenplay by Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely and directed by the Russo brothers, Anthony and Joe. So, getting right into those thoughts on this film. Andrew, we got a little sneak peek last week on your thoughts on this one, but you want to give everyone your thoughts on Captain America Winter Soldier.
I think this is one of the best Marvel movies. Solid standalone, great themes, great character development for both the main character as well as some of the side characters, as well as a great execution of those themes.
Nice. And what'd you end up giving it?
I ended up giving an 8.15.
Okay, so pretty solid. Wow. All right, there you go. Not quite Whiplash level fanboying over it, but pretty solid. Avalon, what was your thoughts on this film?
I don't completely agree this is a standalone because you kind of do need to see the first Avenger for some context. It doesn't really reiterate some of the points from the first Avenger, but
Sure.
but it is a good sequel. It is perhaps one of the best sequels in the Marvel canon as far as all their movies go. I gave it a 7.95, so I gave it pretty high score.
Nice. That's pretty solid. I don't know. Are both of those higher than what you guys gave for the first Avenger?
I'm pretty sure, yes, mine is.
Yeah,
Because mine was initially 6.7 or something, 6.4, and then I raised it to 7 at the end, so...
Yeah, that's interesting because I know that for yeah, I mean, there's a whole discussion on that. If you guys want to hear the discussion on that review, go ahead and check it out in the. I'm sure we'll put it down below on the actual podcast episode, but it's definitely unusual to see a sequel do better than the original. But usually, if you do, that's a great sign. I think for this one, it had a lot going for it in regards to some of the characters. Bucky Barnes, of course, as everyone knows at this point, is a key character in this film. Adds a lot, makes it very interesting. That being said, I'm not quite the fanboy that everyone else is on this podcast. I can't believe something would get as low or lower than Brave New World for me, but in this case, no, it did not. I just had to see if you guys would react. But no, I gave it a 5.8. So it was respectable. I don't think that it's an amazing film, but I'm willing to be convinced otherwise if Andrew can truly convince me. Doubtful, but we'll see. Let's get into it today. So, before we get into it, if you are curious about this film, don't know a lot about this film, we would like to hand it over to Andrew to tell us what Captain America, the Winter Soldier, is about.
Captain America Winter Soldier picks up where the first Avenger and the Avengers movie left off, right? You've got Captain America readjusting to his life in the 21st century. As the movie progresses, you start to realize that Captain America kind of struggling with his identity now. Who is he, if not the soldier he was made to be? And he is challenged in this by many of the people in supporting roles. As the movie progresses, he realizes that the institutions that he once fought for and stood for, and the institutions that created him, are not what he thought they were. And so he's forced to come to terms with whether or not he ought to value the values that America stands for or the institutions that are America at this point. And that he finds out Hydra has infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D., he finds out his best friend he thought was dead has now been turned into Hydra's weapon and has been for the last 70 years, and ultimately culminates in a fight where he has to confront both the institution he stood for and his best friend.
There we go. And that's the pot. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so let's get into it. We're going to start with that opening scene, as we always do, getting you into the film. You see this scene where... you know what? Never mind. I'm I'm not feeling it right now. Andrew, why don't you go ahead and fanboy over this first opening scene? Because I know you want to. What are your thoughts?
Um, I think the opener's great. Okay. I think this is the beginning of where you start to see Marvel movies starting off with that initial fight scene, right? I think what's different with this one as opposed to some others is that this fight scene is intrinsically tied to the rest of the plot, right? It's not just a fight scene for the sake of a fight scene. It is Captain America going aboard a ship that has been taken over by pirates, which then ties directly into the plot. Um, you have a lot established in this opening scene, right? You establish Captain America as now an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. You establish Black Widow as an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. I also think it's interesting. I don't remember the opener being as violent as it was, but I do appreciate it. Because I think it establishes Captain America as a soldier. He's not necessarily a superhero in this movie, at least when it starts out. He is a soldier, an agent of Shield. And what that means is he's going to take life or not really pull his punches when it comes to fighting these pirates, right? He doesn't see them as innocent civilians, and you get that with him throwing a knife into a guy's hand and kicking a man off of a boat or launching him across the boat and knocking him unconscious, okay? He's throwing the shield at like 40 miles an hour. There is no punches pulled here. It also sets him up as being disgruntled already with Nick Fury's current way of running things, right? He talks about how he's sick of being Fury's cleanup crew, right? He doesn't enjoy necessarily the way that things are being run. So overall, I think the opener is great. You also introduced Falcon technically before this. And I'm sure we'll talk about Falcon later, but I think that
And you
the
get
intro...
Batroc the Leaper. What a great intro.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot. Batroc the Leaper. All I have to say about him is he is what Giancarlo's character should have been. Okay, like it's great. If you like Marvel comics and you know who he is, great cameo. If you don't have any idea who this idiot is, then he's a random goon who is a pirate, and that's all that there is. That's all we need to know about him.
Nice. Avalon, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I like the opening. It was a good opening, so not really much
Nice.
more to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the running thing was somewhat interesting. For the Batroc the Leaper whole scenario where he's hijacked the ship and they're saving it and all that stuff, it was, I mean, it's the same thing you see for Thor Ragnarok, right? Where it's a engaging scene with fights and whatnot, but it has some relevance to later in the film, so it actually is relevant overall rather than simply being a fight for the sake of being a cool fight. It is getting into that formulaic realm, as we talked about before in other episodes, but it's not terrible. So I gave it about middle of the road on that point because I'm not going to get too crazy on that. Let's really talk about who we're here for, though. Captain America. Andrew, you hinted at it a bit where you said he's struggling with this idea of Nick Fury and who he's supposed to be and what is all going on here. What are your thoughts on Captain America in the second installment in the series?
With Captain America, I have notes on him. I have plenty of notes on Captain America.
Like about 5 of the 6 pages worth?
No, he's just half of one. So there's a couple of plot points with Captain America, right? He is flawed not in the sense that he has like a character defect, right? He is flawed in the sense that he is incomplete as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
he completely finds his identity in the soldier that he was. And I think it's also interesting because you get tidbits of almost where he is afraid to let go of being that soldier because it means letting go of everything that he had before falling into the ice, right? And you get so much of this through just short tidbits of a scene, right? You get his conversation with Sam where he's talking about what it's like to be a soldier and how he feels like he's melting into his pillows. You get the conversation with Sam at the VA where he says, I don't know what I would do with myself. I can't get out because I have nothing other than this mission. You get his conversation with Peggy where he's kind of experiencing this dilemma where he doesn't know what he stands for anymore, right? Because before in the first Avenger, what he stands for and who he works for are the same thing in his mind, right? The American government and the values he stands for are kind of one and the same. Now, the American government has become so bureaucratic, and he doesn't even work for the US government anymore. He works for SHIELD. And he doesn't know that SHIELD stands for the same values that he does. And so now he's met with this dilemma of, where do I draw the line? And so you have this morally ambiguous world that he's living in, and he's struggling with that. The second portion where he's struggling is that the woman he loved, right, has lived this full life, and he still holds the little, I forget, it's like a compass, right, that has her picture in it. She's
The
lived this full
locket?
life.
Is that what you're
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
She married someone, and now
He's not
she
Jack Sparrow. What are you talking about, Andrew?
Okay, well, it looked like a compass. Anyways,
And you say you're a fan of this movie?
you know what? We'll settle this right now.
Oh man.
You bum.
Wait for Andrew's short intermission where he wins a petty fight.
It is a compass. You bum.
I didn't say I would win the fight.
You suck. Anyways,
Oh, it's amazing.
so if I'm allowed to continue now.
Go ahead.
You're allowed to say whatever you want. I just might cut it
Really,
out.
I can say whatever I want.
Careful, Maverick.
Okay.
Don't give him too much power.
Previous co-host on the podcast.
Anyways, moving on. He's missing this kind of romantic connection, right? And I will preface this by saying I do appreciate that they don't lean too heavily into this, right? They don't really give him a conclusion to this, and they don't lean into the romantic aspect of this. They more portray him as the man out of time, and the conclusion to this arc is his willingness to pursue someone. And it's that kind of side plot that you have with Black Widow. And then the final portion of this is he now has his friend he has to confront after he realizes who the Winter Soldier is as the movie progresses, and he has to find a way to navigate that dilemma of fighting off Hydra, but the Winter Soldier being a key element and a key weapon for Hydra's end goals.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I think I'll be taking some of those into account because I definitely didn't have the same analysis. I don't know that I fully agree. Avalon, I would love to hear your thoughts while I work through my end of it. But yeah, go ahead, give your thoughts, especially if you have any pushback. I know we love that on this podcast.
I would love to hear some pushback.
Well,
yes.
the reality is, me and Andrew got pretty similar scores on some things, so I can't imagine most of our scores are going to be much different in some regards. Now, I don't think Captain America is a perfectly flawed character. He didn't get full points from me, but I do think his character is compelling enough, and he's flawed enough as a character to be someone you follow for the sake of the story, and he's someone you can relate to on a certain level.
Sure. I mean, I think that your analysis, right, of Captain America, where he's having to separate an identity of the military from an identity of his American ideals, is an interesting one. I do think he's less flawed in this film compared to the previous one. And I actually really tried to mentally struggle with if this made it a better film or not. To be honest, most of what I found compelling about this film completely surrounded the idea of Bucky Barnes, aka the Winter Soldier, in this film. Very little of it had to do with his struggles with his role in the government. And the reason I think for that is because his character arc really has nothing to do with his struggle with his role with the American government compared to his role as a patriot. And you know that there isn't a struggle there because from the start, he basically makes that decision like that. he makes a decision almost instantly, like, I'm going to follow my American ideals rather than follow the government. And you hear that when he has this revelation with Nick Fury about the existence of the helicarriers. And he immediately goes, nope, this is wrong. This is bad. We're not doing this. I'm anti this. We're not on board. And so, like, from the very beginning of the movie, he already has his ideals established. And so there's no arc in that regard to change, to grow, or to struggle in that way. Does it cause conflict? Sure, because it's one of his antagonizing forces is the person who was previously, as of this movie, his employer, Shield, right? But it's also a situation where you go, okay, is that then an area of struggle for him? No, clearly not, because he didn't have to think twice about what he was going to do in that scenario from the very beginning of the movie. In regards to the idea of the B plot with the romance and stuff, I do think that that's somewhat fair, because I mean, it's the B plot, so it's not that important that he has this romance relationship, but him moving on is important, and it's tied to that overall struggle of his, and when it complements, that's actually even better. So I don't disagree with that analysis. If what I just said made sense to everyone, great. If not, it was kind of a jumbled mess of me thinking through this for the first time. Basically, the B plot of him having this romance, but he's trying to let go of his romance from the first movie, but now she's old. How can he do that, right? Well, it's like he's stuck in a different time and he has to learn to move on. And this movie has some semblance of that in the film, right? Does he do that in the film? Is that developed? Yes, it is. Is it the B plot? Yes, it is. But is it tangentially related at the same time? Also, yes, it is. So it's a valid point. It's definitely worth bringing up. Is it going to get a lot of points from me because of that? No. But it's also a fair argument from Andrew. I don't know where else I was going with that. I think I had another point, but I forget it at this point, so we'll bring it back. Justin, then I think some of those other struggles around Bucky Barnes are more valuable. I think some of the character development has more to do with characters like Bucky Barnes, Nick Fury, characters like that, than necessarily Captain America himself. So, and those areas are the more interesting aspects. But anyways, we'll get to those when we do. But Andrew, do you want to push back on me? I think you might disagree. Oh, no.
I think
What are you gonna do?
I think we're coming to different conclusions using the same information here, right? I think you're looking for a Captain America who is like intrinsically flawed and lacking in the sense that like his character. I'm trying to think of how to word this, because it's not like I disagree with you, but I also disagree with the end result. I think that Captain America is still the quote unquote good guy and that he's going to make the right decision. But in this movie, I think it does the best job of presenting him with those impossible decisions, right? And so even if he makes the decision early on to push back against S.H.I.E.L.D., it isn't really until he realizes that Hydra is within S.H.I.E.L.D. that he is able to make that decision in a concrete way. Like, he knows now where he needs to ally himself. Whereas before, it was kind of this struggle of, okay, I don't know who to trust. He ends up trusting Black Widow, but that was more out of necessity, really, than anything else. And he kind of is going on this mission to get to the bottom of what happened to Nick Fury. And so I think there is still these impossible decisions. And the thing is once he realizes that Hydra is within S.H.I.E.L.D., he's presented with another impossible decision, because almost less than like 10 minutes later, he finds out that Bucky is now working for Hydra. So he's presented with another decision he has to make.
Sure. I mean, yeah, the Bucky decision is definitely where the movie gets hot, right? You're like, this movie is definitely adding some real tension for the protagonist, and for good reason, because it's now his best friend that he's coming fist to fist with, and he's resurrected from the dead for the sake of being his enemy, which is crazy, right? That's a crazy scenario. So it's definitely chock full of tension, great to add for the sake of creating a compelling storyline. I'll think about it. I'll try to revisit it for the sake. I don't think what you said terminates the way it does, but maybe it does. I'll think about it. We'll keep moving because we don't want to get people bored. You might be bored already. If you clicked off, I'm so sorry. If you're still here, thank you for listening. We're going to move on. We're going to talk about Do we want to talk about the villain now? Do we want to talk about Bucky Barnes now? I mean, Bucky's a big part of this film.
We can talk about side characters and get those out of the way.
You want to talk about Zola? What are your
Well,
thoughts
he's
on
more of a
Zola showing up in
villain
this film?
than a side character, but sure. Because I have them separated, right? Because there are so many different villains that play a part in this film, but there's also so many different side characters. It's like for villains, we've got Pierce, we've got Batroc, we've got Zola.
I don't know that every character in this film deserves a full-on analysis, right?
Sure,
and people could, unless there's like so much interesting about them in this film, which I don't think that Maria Hill really deserves that much of an analysis as a character. I don't know that she added a ton, but sure, maybe Agent 13, if you wanted to, could have some analysis because she has merit to the plot, but like really, honestly, it's more like Nick Fury and then Sam Wilson and maybe Natasha, right?
Widow.
Yeah.
I think in terms of like the villains, we got Batroc out of the way. Pierce, I think, I'll end up talking a lot more about when we get to the themes of this movie, because I think him, Cap, and Fury kind of play a lot into the overarching themes of this movie.
Yes, that's true.
But in terms of side characters, right, we've got at least the three that really matter is Fury, Falcon, and Black Widow. Agent 13, I think I covered everything I wanted to with her, talking about the subplot of Cap's romance, right? Sure, she kind of plays into that. She doesn't really have too much depth other than that in this movie, or in any other movie for that matter, really. We don't really get to know much about her other than she's Agent 13 and she works for S.H.I.E.L.D. and she was assigned to Cap as a kind of like a bodyguard detail.
That was more of a joke, but sure, we'll run with that.
I don't know if you guys wanted to take one of the side characters though, and then
sure, Avalon, you pick a piece.
Pick a side character. I mean, the reality is, unlike Andrew, I labeled almost everyone a side character except for Winter Soldier and Pierce Brown. I feel like, no, not Pierce Brown. What was I saying it?
Alexander Pierce.
Alexander Pierce. All right, okay. But like those two
renaming characters in the podcast is crazy.
Yeah. Alexander Pierce and Winter Soldier are the two villains. I'd say there are other villainous characters, but they don't play a big enough role to be like a major, like get the villain. I don't know. I don't really consider them like full-on villains to get classified as a villain. Like what's his name? Brock Rumlove, who's Crossbones. Also, I feel like he's a side character. He's not really a full-on villain. He works for Pierce. And he but he's not like a fully fledged character with motivation and everything. He just follows orders. So
he's just a henchman.
Yeah, he's just a henchman. He's supposed to be a character, but he's not given any development. So
yeah,
but in a way, we don't really need development from him. He's just added muscle, really. The only characters who really mattered were Pierce and Winter Soldier, because they're the primary antagonists in this whole story. And I guess you could say Zola, but Zola is like, his role is so small, he just hands information over. So, as far as other side characters, I think for the story, Nick Fury and Black Widow and Sam Wilson have enough character development to be fully fledged characters. Like, we get an idea of who they are outside and what they want and why they do what they do. And I think that's what you want from fully fledged characters. You don't want like nebulous cloud, like you don't want cardboard cutouts, more or less, for your central characters. So, and they're developed enough that they look like real people to the audience. So, and that's my take on the side characters. So,
no, I think the side characters are pretty decent. I think that Romanov is interesting as she's trying to keep her past a secret while protecting this asset in S.H.I.E.L.D., right? Specifically, she thinks that Nick Fury is like legit, and she ties some of her value to him because she knows that he knows things and whatnot. So she has her own motivations. Nick Fury is obviously trying to survive and like stuff like that. So he has a lot of motivation for being involved. Things like that. I think that the question mostly for me lies with Sam Wilson. While he's a decent character and he has some value, I'm not still entirely sure why he just ups and decides that he should be the one to help Captain America and the crew to get back on their feet. But, it's not like a killer point for me. He's just like, all right, whatever. Welcome to the team.
I mean, with Sam Wilson, I'm not really in disagreement here. I think I will say this is probably one of the best showings of Falcon, which isn't saying a lot. And I actually have some thoughts on here tying back to Brave New World. And here's why, right? I think this movie does a good job of showcasing Falcon, but Falcon says it best in this movie when he's talking to Nick Fury. Nick Fury looks at him and he says, "Don't look at me. I do what he does, just slower." And like it's kind of referencing back with them running at the beginning of the movie. The idea is though, Sam Wilson is not really a character in his own right in the sense that you think of a main protagonist. He follows in Captain America's footsteps. He is Captain
Literally.
America's Robin, right?
To your
He
right,
just
yeah. Or to your left.
he does what he does just slower. And they really emphasize this throughout the rest of the franchise up until the end of Endgame, right? You have him in Civil War, he just does what Cap does. The end of this movie, Captain America says, "You don't have to follow along." He says, "I know. When do we start?" You have the end of Endgame when he says, "On your left," right? Just calling back to this scene. And throughout the entirety of the franchise up till the end of Phase 3, Sam Wilson doesn't have any depth as a character, right? And I wrote down, he's an ex-paratrooper who lost his wingman. He doesn't suffer from PTSD. He doesn't have any flaws. He just follows Captain America around like a little puppy dog. This isn't really necessarily a bad thing. It just means he isn't main character material from the get-go. So if they wanted to make Sam Wilson Captain America, right, after the events of Endgame, they needed to give him more development than just, I follow Captain America around, right? As far as, and I also
yeah,
wrote down,
I mean, like to play the devil's advocate, I don't think you're wrong, right? But it's also that they don't necessarily need to do that in this film. I think
True.
the thing with this film specifically is that I just didn't know why he was helping him, other than
Yeah.
oh, I'm just a good guy, Which I guess maybe like that's the whole point of Captain America. He's just a good guy, but that's part of the problem with Captain America IMO, in my opinion. But
But I mean, even with Captain America, even though he is a good guy, there's a lot of reason for that, right? And we talked about this in the last movie too.
Yeah.
They don't
True.
really give Sam a justification for being a good guy other than I work at the VA and I help people through PTSD. And in my mind, making him Captain America is the equivalent of making Rhodey the new Iron Man, right? It's like he is a hero in his own right. There's no reason for him necessarily to take on this mantle of being Captain America. Other than that, like, yeah, he doesn't really have a motivation for helping Cap other than I'm a soldier too. I think Black Widow is a much better supporting role in this movie to Captain America, and I think
she's trying to be his wingman, help him out.
Yeah, a wingman with benefits there. I think Black Widow's character goes. I'm not gonna lie. I think this movie is the most interesting she gets in the movies, other than maybe Infinity War. I find her more interesting in this movie than the actual Black Widow movie. I find her more interesting in this movie than Iron Man 2 and Captain America Civil War. I think she gets a lot of development here in the sense that she is similar to Steve. She finds her identity in S.H.I.E.L.D., right? She came to S.H.I.E.L.D. to escape the life before her. Cap came to S.H.I.E.L.D. to kind of continue living the life he once had. But both of them, for different reasons, find their identity in what S.H.I.E.L.D. is. And you get this in the conversation after they are targeted by Strike when they're inside that army base. And she says, like, I thought I was going clean by joining S.H.I.E.L.D. Turns out I traded in the KGB for Hydra, right? And it's at this point that she comes to the realization that she can't work for an institution. And she kind of becomes embittered towards institutions in general, which Captain America Civil War kind of undermines, but we'll get to that later. But I think that her character does have a solid arc here. I think she does kind of go along with Captain America. She also acts as a catalyst to kind of push him back into the world that he now lives in. Because you have the line from Nick Fury where he says, the world's, I forget what it's like, the world's changing. It's time you adjust, like, get with the times, Cap. And he means this in a more political sense, but I think Black Widow kind of helps him terminate this in a more healthy sense, where it's like you kind of need to move on from the past that you are stuck holding on to, right? He's holding on to the past that is Peggy Carter, that is World War
Right.
II, that is
Right.
fighting Nazis. And this movie is about him moving on from that. And Black Widow acts as the catalyst to kind of push him into the modern day and moving away from that.
Right, which is why I would say that the B plot that you brought up earlier is actually relevant, because you're talking about something that's interrelated with his main struggle of moving on in his life. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it's very appropriate that she aligns that while also having her own viewpoints and struggles and all this stuff that goes along with her aspect in the film. So, I don't disagree with that at all. Now we might as well get on to the villains. What are your thoughts on Zola? Because I want to bring up Zola for no good reason. What are your thoughts, Andrew? Because Avalon said he's there and
I feel
done.
like you have some level of trolling to do with Zola, and I'm not sure what it would be at this point. But I'm here for it.
Well, so, okay, sure, I'll go first on this one. I don't actually have a lot of thoughts on Zola, other than that I think that his monologue...
this is what you're going for.
He is dumb. I think he's dumb in this film. I thought every time I've heard of Zola in this, like, super robot form, he sounds like an intriguing, super cool villain, right? He basically is like, I'm going to die, so instead I'm going to take my brain and upload it to these machines, and they're going to keep my cranium alive while I continue to work in the world. And that's like the concept of Zola continuing to exist until this time. And it's like, okay, that's kind of cool. And then you see him here, and what does he do? He's like, I was monologuing on purpose so that you would get blown up by a bomb. And now I die for sure, and you hopefully die too. And this is kind of going back to what we talked about with Samuel Stearns, but it's like, if you're really this super genius that could create these multi-layered, like, brain systems out of computers to keep you alive, why couldn't you think of a way to keep yourself alive at least, or not reveal all of your plans to Captain America but still keep him here? Like, it just seemed so unnecessary, and like just a very convenient way to explain information to the audience for the sake of moving the plot along. That's all.
Well, to play devil's advocate here, Zola, this does happen to Zola in the comics. He does upload his brain to a machine, and he becomes like this robot. Like his intelligence and everything is uploaded to Hydra servers.
Yeah, no, I know. And I think that's cool. Now, that's the cool part.
Yeah. I interpreted it like, sure, he looks like he's dead, but I also, like, from a comic book perspective, I guess maybe I come from the I, like, being a comic book nerd that I am, I looked at that, I was like, he's probably not dead, he's probably uploaded to another server somewhere else. I mean, that's a somewhat reasonable explanation, all things considered. It's like, he's probably not dead, he's probably somewhere else, and he knows it. And I mean, if you are a robot consciousness at this point, that's what you would do to safeguard your legacy. Like, I'm still alive somewhere else. So, just like, you wouldn't have to worry about death, per se, because, there's someone else, like, there's another copy of you somewhere. Now, it doesn't explicitly say that in the movie. I'll give you credit there. So, but...
No, and it doesn't, like, need to. That only just plays into the other trope, which is no one dies in the MCU. But, it's also, like, I don't have a huge problem with that. I wasn't actually meaning to get caught up in Zola. I was just like, that just struck me as dumb. But I'm not gonna like kill the film.
Well, Maverick.
Zola didn't factor into my rating at all for this film. I just want to say that. That was not at all what gave me his points.
I'm gonna give my 30-second spiel here because I want to anyways. I think Zola in this film, it makes perfect sense why he does what he does, right? I agree with Avalon. He probably has himself backed up. Think Duplicate from Invincible, right? Yep, there's no reason he wouldn't. It's literally just Ultron, but a lower form of AI or intelligence, okay? The second thing is Zola is very much a coward in the first movie, right? He very much likes Hydra, but not for the idealistic reasons that Red Skull does. He likes it for the idea of power, which is why he kind of continues to push Hydra throughout this film. His arrogance is what leads to his downfall in this film, in the sense that it does serve a purpose installing them, but of course he's going to tell them his plans. He does it in the first movie too when he's talking to the general. He can't help himself. It's
Well,
this
no, in
like
that one
ego
he was
trip for him.
basically blackmailed to do it. They were like, "You're
Well,
gonna die anyways. We might as well help you get out of here if you tell us what's going on."
well, yes, but he also does it because he's like, he does it to the extent where it's more than he needs to. Okay, he is a character who very much thrives on an ego trip, and I think this film just kind of pulls that through a little bit more. Granted, again, he also didn't factor into my review at all. I just wanted to push back. Okay.
Yeah, no, we're not gonna get too focused on Zoloff. What are your thoughts, Avalon, on Alexander Pierce, the main leader of the the Security Council?
Well, yeah, he's like one of the heads of Shield in some ways. Like part of the Security Council. I thought he was an interesting character because he's not supposed to be. You're not supposed to know he's a villain from the get-go. So it's almost like, in that regard, he's set up pretty well as a character. And he's given reasons for why he's doing what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when the info comes out, well, in some ways his motivation, like when it comes out where his allegiance lies, it makes total sense. And it fits in the nature of the plot. So I think I'm not. The only thing I'm not sure about is because you mentioned he represents a theme. I guess he does in some ways, but I didn't really think about that part of his character very much for some reason. Like now that you mentioned it, I'm like now thinking about that. I'm like, does he represent a theme? I'm not completely sure.
Well, yeah,
some
and
reason.
we'll get to the themes in a bit.
Yeah.
I do think that he definitely adds to. Well, yeah, we'll get to that. I'm not going to get too worried about that for now.
Yeah.
But I think that he's an interesting villain. He falls into one of generally you seem to see two different types of villains, especially in Marvel movies. One of them is like the man pulling the strings on the back, and the other one is like a super powerful anti-force to the strong force of the main hero, right? So in this case, Alexander Pierce is the first one. He's the man pulling the strings. He's got power. He's in a position of authority. He uses that to achieve his own ends, right? In this case, it's to have this agenda where they have preventative measures that assassinate people who would be considered threats before they actually commit crimes. I think that he's interesting. I don't know that he's the most compelling villain. I think that I call this one a two-parter on the villains aspect. In my opinion, the main ones are Alexander Pierce and, of course, Bucky Barnes. And Bucky Barnes is this huge antagonizing factor to Captain America, and it creates an interesting one because he's also previously his main man, right? His big bud. So, we'll get to Bucky in a second, but Alexander Pierce is a character really interesting in regards to the themes that he develops, but I don't know that as a character himself, I found him incredibly compelling. There's, at the end, some core drive for power, right? That seems to be behind what he's saying, and he seems to justify it under the guise of giving world peace, when clearly that seems to be some level of a facade, even in his conversations with the people who are other members of the Security Council. So it was fine. I don't know that power is a terrible motivator for villains. He's just he wasn't the main focus of this as the film progressed, and that's obvious. Bucky is the main focus of this. In regards to him, I think that he's very compelling. He's the most compelling part of this film. He's this mysterious guy. Although I don't remember. Do you guys remember if the commercials for this film revealed him to be Bucky? I think they did.
No, most of them did not. I remember at the time because we had some friends who didn't know that that Winter Soldier was Bucky Barnes before the movie came out.
Oh, really? Okay.
Like they were shocked when they were like, "Oh, Bucky's like Winter Soldier is Bucky Barnes, his friend." Like that was a shock to them.
Okay. All right. Well, then that's on my bad. I did put it in the revelations part because it is still significant. But in regards to Bucky as a character, yeah, he's super interesting, and that revelation changes everything in regards to highlighting what's going on. Um, Definitely this guy who's got a lot internally going on with him struggling with his brainwashing, and then at the same time, he's clearly got these orders. He's going to carry out the orders, and he's basically Captain America, but then he's got this super powerful arm and all these other cool gadgets and training that goes into him that makes him just a truly formidable force compared to Captain America. So, uh, great character, probably the best part of the film. Everything else is trash, but besides that. So,
I mean,
go ahead, Andrew.
I would take that honestly if that's Maverick's take. Bro,
this slight little provocation right there.
Bucky's just so good. First of all, when I'm watching this film, right, I want to just say I watched it 3 times. I didn't watch it 3 times through, though. I tried to watch it once with my siblings. They all fell asleep, and then I did too because I'd been up for like 2 days or something. And then the second time I tried to watch it, we had people over. And then the third time we tried to watch it, we're locking in and watching this. And I got my dad to watch it too. And my dad actually enjoyed it, which I was like, I knew you'd enjoy this film. But as I'm watching this film, right, there's a couple of things I'm thinking about in regards to Bucky. One, he is meant to be a massive plot twist, right? There's 2 major twists in this film. One, Hydra's a portion of S.H.I.E.L.D. 2, Bucky is actually the Winter Soldier. And I think if you're a Marvel fan, right, you're going to know who Bucky is. But watching this movie, they do the revelation so well, even knowing that there's going to be a lot of people watching this who know what's coming, right? And the way you do that is how do the characters respond when the revelation is, revealed? And Captain America's reaction to finding out who the Winter Soldier is so good in this movie, right? He immediately freezes up. He had no hesitation fighting the Winter Soldier leading up to this. As soon as Bucky's mask is taken off, he freezes, and he's no longer participating in that fight. If you watch the fight, it's Falcon and Black Widow that send him running, right? Black Widow launches the grenade. Falcon kind of flies in, kicks him away, and then the rest of Hydra shows up. But Cap is out of the fight, and you can tell too the fight is completely taken out of him after this too. He just immediately surrenders to the strike force. And now, granted, there's like 100 guys with guns pointed at him, but still, there's like no resistance on his part. He's like just completely dumbfounded, and he just drops his shield. He's like, I don't even know what to do here. And then you have the car ride over where he's like, Sam is the one talking, kind of driving the conversation at this point, and Cap's just in disbelief.
He's trying to mentally figure out, how is this even possible?
Yeah.
That the friend that I saw fall out of a moving train down into a ravine is still alive.
Yeah. And then you even have this progress further where it's like he finds out Nick Fury's alive, and it's almost like him and Black Widow are kind of surprised, but they're also like, Nick Fury hides so much from us at this point. Is it really a shock? And Cap's kind of like, he's kind of pissed. And when Nick Fury's like, oh, we're going to salvage it, he's like, no, bro, we're destroying everything. Screw you. Like, this is insane. I hate Hydra. Hydra can go die in a hole, and I'm going to put it there for what they did to my friend. And for what they did to me too. Like, I lost 70 years. My friend is now turned into this mindless weapon. And on top of that, like, I think thematically, Bucky is done so well, right? Leading up to his reveal, every time he's on screen, the music is on point. You have this sense of just heightened tension, okay? Captain America chasing him through that building, and then him just catching the shield. Oh, absolute cinema. Love that scene. Him taking out Nick Fury, him being there to take out Nick Fury, his reveal with Alexander Pierce, and Pierce killing the maid. Like, it's he's like in the shadows. Every time he shows up on screen, it's like, okay, something's about to go down. Even when you know that it's Bucky still, like, him showing up is just like, okay, he's just absolutely owning these S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, like blowing up a Quinjet, just ripping Falcon's wings off and throwing him over the side. Just
won't be the first time that happens to Sam.
Yeah, I think also just in terms of his own internal struggle, like, he doesn't have a lot to go on, but it's like his inner self is telling him he knows this guy, Captain America, and he doesn't know why, but he knows Cap's reaction is genuine, and there's something gnawing at him internally, like, there's something not right here, and that's why they have to wipe him all over, and even in doing so, it doesn't truly reset his programming.
Right.
And that's why you have the final fight where like he's struggling, like this is my mission, but also something's not right here.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think that I will even say about this going into the next one is that some of the ideas around Bucky and this idea of redeeming someone, right? Can someone be redeemed from the darkest of circumstances or from the deepest of brainwashing scenarios that we have, right? That is layered in this film and not fully completed intentionally, right? Where you have these other ideas being developed in this one, you have this arc with Bucky started here and in some ways answered, but not fully answered until you get to the next film. So I think that this is one of the few times where I actually give the Marvel Universe kudos in regards to how they layered things, where they actually did it very well in regards to having a complete arc in this film, but then also developing arcs that are intentionally left open to develop a full arc in the next film.
Yeah, and I will say also, I really do appreciate the fact that they don't tell you as the audience how much of his programming has been kind of messed up, right? He saves
Mm-hmm.
Cap, but he leaves. He doesn't stick around, and then you get the end credit scene, which I think this is one of the few end credit scenes that actually adds to the movie itself, rather than kind of teasing the next one. And it does
Right.
both actually, because you see him in the same place Cap was at the beginning of the movie, kind of looking at a picture of himself, kind of like, and you don't know
Mm-hmm.
what's going on in his head. You just know he's seeing a picture of himself as a fellow member of the Howling Commandos. And so
Right.
I think Bucky is definitely one of the most, if not the most compelling characters in this movie.
Oh, I'd agree. I mean, better than Cap.
I as much as I would love to argue with you on this, I just love Bucky so much as a character, so I'm not even gonna push back here. Easily my favorite
That's
character
amazing.
in the entire MCU, and I think that his introduction is handled phenomenally.
Nice. What are you guys' thoughts on the themes as we are kind of dancing around that a bit right here? You obviously had some. I mentioned one about Bucky Barnes and this idea of redeeming someone who's so far gone, it appears, right? He's clearly brainwashed out of his mind to do terrible things. But then the power of friendship, if you want to. That's a classic Disney.
I don't know if it's the power of friendship, but you know, I think if anyone were to do it right, they do it right with the Winter Soldier. Okay.
Oh gosh, sorry, Frozen.
Yeah, no, Frozen can go eat garbage and die.
All right, Andrew, calm down. The kids are crying. What are your no? Are there any other themes or ideas you think are discussed in this film or introduced that ought to be mentioned as well?
Do you want me to go first?
Sure.
All right.
Avalon's looking at a screen.
I think this movie really shines with its themes, right? And the overarching theme here, in my own words, would be the question of freedom versus security. And I think it's very, very, I don't know if I'd say accurate, but it's well done in that it's a Captain America movie, right? And you have three different layers of this, or I'd say it's more of a spectrum, right? You got freedom on one end, 100% freedom, 100% security. You've got three different plot points on this spectrum in the representation of a character, right? You got Captain America, much more right leaning towards the side of freedom. You got Alexander Pierce, all the way on the left end of the spectrum of complete security. And then you've got Nick Fury, who kind of starts the movie a little bit more left of center, but kind of moves towards the right as he realizes that institutions are easily corrupted. And he kind of learns where he ought to stand by the end of this movie. And I will also say, because I reserved my thoughts for Fury for this, just because I think Fury gets a lot more development in this movie than any other movie. Because
Mm-hmm.
other movies, he's just this guy who is working in the shadows. Whereas this movie
Mm-hmm.
really humanizes him. You get his story about his grandpa. You get his conflict with Captain America. You get his conflict with Alexander Pierce. You get his background for how did he get to this position of being in charge of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the first place, right? And I think for Cap, his position is security, while it may be nice, when in conflict with freedom, ought never to be prioritized over freedom itself, right? I may live in a dangerous world, but I will take freedom over security any day of the week. Alexander Pierce, oh, screw that, right? Freedom just results in anarchy. We should never be valuing freedom over security. Nick Fury's trying to come at this, and he tells Cap, he's trying to be realistic about it, right? We take the world as it is. I think the way the movie terminates is kind of saying taking the world as it is only leaves the people in that world worse off. Like, there ought to be a sense of idealism and something we should strive for, even if that ideal may never be realized by us in our lifetime. But it doesn't mean we ought to be just content with the problems of the world and just take the world as it is. So
Right.
I think that's the overarching theme, and I think there are some sub-themes or minor themes that are explored, but I think the major portion of this movie is the question of freedom versus security, and I think the way that they handle it for a superhero movie is really good.
Yeah. And I had that same spectrum written out on my side, so I'm glad we both picked up on that. You kind of stole my thunder, but but no, that was good. That was honestly right where I was going to go with that. Avalon, do you have any thoughts on that as well?
I mean, you kind of summed it up pretty well. I mean, it's like the themes are freedom and versus security. And it is like, as you mentioned, it's between Steve Rogers and Alexander Pierce. Like, they're the two embodiments of those ideals, with Nick Fury caught in the middle. With Nick Fury at first leaning towards Alexander Pierce's side, though not completely. And then as the movie progresses, he gradually becomes more on Steve Rogers' side until like they join together and fight Hydra and Pierce. So I mean, it's a really good portrayal of those ideals and conflict throughout the story.
Yeah.
So
I will say that he's more begrudging at the beginning when they force him to say, yeah, all right, we're going to start from scratch. He's like, no, we don't need to start from scratch. And they're like, yeah, we do. He goes, all right, fine. But yeah, overall, he does have that complete arc, which is great. The only real beef I have with Nick Fury as a side, since we didn't really discuss him earlier, was the fact that he dies just to come back to life, which the only thing with that is just building into the general mistrust that you start to have with the MCU of people actually dying, right? It's like when you start to see that play out within the same film on the silver screen, you start to go, okay, but are they really dead? Because they just resurrected this person in this film and this person in that film and this person in the other film. And this was just another example of that, where it's like, okay, Nick Fury is dead, but he's not. He's alive.
To play devil's advocate in this particular case, the themes of this movie, considering this is somewhat of an espionage like thriller movie, it made sense. His coming back to like revelation of him not dying would kind of made sense in the context of the plot. I'll admit that Marvel does overuse the bringing people back to life bit, but in this particular movie, I was okay with it because it made sense considering the themes and the setting of the story. And considering who Nick Fury was. So I was like, well, I actually didn't care. Like, I actually thought it was fitting for the story. So
I'm not going to say that it's incorrect for them to, especially in this film. I think they had a logical enough explanation for it. I think just doing that over time erodes people's confidence in you as a storyteller. And I think that that's what this was adding to. And even just to push back on the thematic idea, right? You could say that he was closer to Pierce's side of it, saying that we need security above all else. And then look, security turns its head and kills him. So as a matter of fact, it actually doubles down on the themes and the thematic stories it's trying to tell by saying that if you're so beat down on security, guess what happens sometimes? It ends up rearing its ugly head and becoming your enemy. So I think that it actually plays into the themes to actually kill him from the start of the film by having him align with the values that you don't want to preach in the story that you're telling in this movie. But, anyways, point being, I'm not going to get too caught up in it because it's still decent. I'm just like, dude, why do you guys do this? This is the beginning of the end for you guys. You guys can't even keep the actors out of the film. Robert Downey Jr. is coming back, so
I mean, we are. I don't think it's that bad in this film. And I will agree. I don't really see the point of bringing Nick Fury back, considering I don't think he adds very much after his death, right? And this didn't get like full points from me. while it did make sense, I'm not going to say it was bad, and like it didn't add, but it didn't take away, I guess is the best way to put it. It's just kind of like a net neutral, and I think any way that it takes away
I
is
like
more
Samuel L. Jackson.
okay. I think it more takes away in the grand scheme of things for the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean,
You know they're really dead in the MCU when it's a super dramatic slow-mo death scene of a character who showed up twice as a side character in the film. Then you know they're actually dead.
like Yondu.
Yeah. Or Quicksilver.
Yeah.
Nice. Anyways, we're gonna move on.
I mean, I will also say real quick as a side note when we're talking about
Sure.
themes, there are two things here. One, I think it's interesting that this movie kind of asked the question of what is America, and I think the answer they give is what Captain America ended up standing for in the end. Right? Is America? Is he the institutions he serves, or is he the ideals that America stands for? And I think they give you that answer too. And I think secondarily, they kind of give you this. They ask the question of how do we achieve the best form of freedom while also maintaining a semblance of security. Right? You can't have ultimate freedom, otherwise you have anarchy. And so the solution we're presented with is kind of this police state. And the answer they give us this is not the answer, but they also don't really give you the ultimate solution, if you will, for how do we achieve this balance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is kind of intentional because
Right.
Captain America isn't really here to give you the solution for how the government ought to be run, but he is here to tell you when you're not doing something right.
Right. He's not necessarily a creator of the ideal world. He's just pushing back against the tyranny in the world.
He's not here to give you the final solution.
Nice.
That was Hitler's job.
Yeah. Exactly.
Anyways.
I wasn't gonna say it.
Well, I did for you.
All right. Where was I going with this? Not there.
Well,
I was
we're moving
going
on
toward...
to the next portion, which is
yeah.
closure.
I mean, we kind of we're talking. I mean, we agree there's revelations unless Avalon. Did you think there's anything you wanted to note about the revelations about Bucky Barnes or Hydra and Shield? How the story, and then moving into how the story ends as well.
I mean, the only thing I'll say is that the revelations fit the story. I mean, considering Steve's journey, like coming back, it was is a good revelation. Like the very organization he's working for now is a very organization he was fighting for back during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that is a good revelation because it's like, oh, you like that's in any storytelling sense, that's like a great revelation. It's like, oh, the people you used to fight are the people you're working for secretly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, like that changes everything. And that's a great like change of the situation. So now, and the whole thing with Bucky Barnes is also good. So the revelation, I'll just say both revelations are excellent, and I love both of them. But I mean, you guys hashed it out pretty well. So I mean, I'm not sure what else to add. So
okay,
it's just...
no, that's totally fair. Did you think that the ending was necessarily surprising, though?
The ending? I mean, I feel like the setting, the ending, the only thing maybe about the ending that is maybe a little surprise, well, not completely, is just that, well, actually, I don't know, now that I'm thinking about it. I mean, Bucky's saving Captain America from the river at the very end. I'm not sure if that's surprising or not. I mean, they kind of give hints to his character being conflicted, Bucky. So, I mean, in that regards, it does make sense. But... I mean, I was satisfied with the ending. I'll say that. It's not like a surprising ending. I guess it kind of follows through with everything that happens before. But it was a good ending, so that's all.
Yeah, it's like you could logically extend that would happen. Just like who do they send out to clean at the end of Wool and Silo? But that's not necessarily told for sure, right? There you go. There's a little reference for you guys. Yeah, no, it's kind of hard to say for sure if that should be given points or not because it's pretty heavily foreshadowed by the idea that you see Bucky Barnes' character arc changing in real time. So, Andrew, what are your thoughts? You're probably going to go to bat for him, right?
I didn't really see the ending as a knockout surprise as the questionnaire puts it in 9 points. I gave it some points because even though it is foreshadowed, it's still kind of a twist, if you will. But I also don't expect the end to really have a twist because we have 2 major twists in the movie itself, and so they already have their plot twists earlier on. I was very satisfied with the ending of this movie, though. I have no complaints here.
Yeah. I know you're satisfied. I'm not asking you that. Just kidding.
Okay, buddy.
Let's see. Where were we?
We were final thoughts, kind of, is where we're at.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the Cap's
impact
character arc at the end of this and the messages this movie is conveying? Do you feel like it terminates well in what it's trying to show us?
Yeah.
Why?
Why? I mean, I feel like I gave a pretty solid defense for this earlier, but I mean, I think at the end of this movie, Captain America no longer represents an institution, right? And this terminates very much in Captain America Civil War, where it's
That's
like,
right.
he is no
Of
longer
course your
held
dad
accountable.
likes this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You hear that, Dad? Maverick's mocking you.
No, I'm not mocking him.
Anyways,
It just clicked for me.
Yeah, I'm surprised that didn't click earlier.
I was in movie mode, not what does Paul Reeder think about this film mode.
Yeah. Anyways, I think
Shout
that
out to Paul Reeder.
let's go. The only reason I'm here. Well, one of them.
That'll stay in.
I assumed as much. We're not going to elaborate on that. Anyways, I think it terminates well because Captain America starts this movie, right? Finding his identity in S.H.I.E.L.D., finding it in some institution that he can fight for as a soldier, right? Good soldiers follow orders. By the end of this film, he's come to the conclusion that the only person who can truly keep him accountable is himself here. And this becomes a major plot point in the next Captain America movie, right? Iron Man wants him to be held accountable by an external body, and Captain America says, no, all the external bodies that have held me accountable in the past have completely screwed things up. And that's the conclusion he comes to at the end of this movie. The themes in this movie, I think they're terminated great. I think Black Widow's character as well. Her arc has come to a form of completion in this movie. Nick Fury as well, even though, he doesn't really add anything by the end. I think his arc does have a completion to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the story overall has a complete arc. And I think this is, like I said before, I think it's probably one of the most complete Marvel movies on its own. And I think that it definitely is one of the top 3 for me of the Marvel movies out there.
I'd second that.
I will say this. Okay, Andrew. I
Go
think
ahead.
that this film is very interesting. It's very good with the themes, but it does confuse me a little bit just because you have 2 different things going on, right? You have this whole thing with Pierce and with Captain America and Nick Fury about like the surveillance state, and should you kill people before they have been proven to have truly committed a crime at that point? Isn't that very anti-American? Isn't this completely opposite the ideal that we're creating, right? And this idea of like innocent until proven guilty is like this big aspect of why Captain America is doing everything that he's doing to stop S.H.I.E.L.D. from continuing on with this program that they've created, right? So that's one aspect of the film. But then on the other aspect of the film, you have this idea of like, Bucky is redeemable from all of these terrible things that have happened, blah, blah, blah. And so there's a sense in which like he's actively protecting a fugitive criminal, while on the other side also saying like people should be like innocent until proven guilty and all this stuff. So it feels a little bit, not like directly in conflict, but a little like this feels disjointed to both on one side say like we need to protect people's rights to be innocent until proven guilty on one side, and then on the other side be like, well, let me just protect my friend because I think he's okay and like he's brainwashed, so everything he has done is not right. And that's more explained in the next film. So maybe it's not worth getting into fully in this one, but it does almost oppose itself in the themes that it's presenting.
I think the way Captain America sees it in this movie is he views Bucky as the victim, not necessarily the perpetrator, right? And he talks about that in the little van ride with Sam Wilson and Black Widow, where it's like, and this is very much drawn out in later films too, where he doesn't see Bucky as necessarily this um, the perpetrator, in the sense that, like, when you're convicted of murder, right? They ask what degrees of murder is it, and is there malice and forethought? And to him, Bucky has no sense of malice because he has no control over his actions here, so he can't truly be guilty in the sense that we often think of people.
Cool.
Anyways,
That's great analysis.
oh boy.
Sorry. I'm just pulling your leg. Yeah, no, yeah, I see what you're saying. I think we'll save honestly the full analysis of this for the next one cuz that's really a big discussion of it, and I think it'll be a really interesting discussion to have because it really plays two sides fairly well in the next one in regards to the themes and not trying to short stock either of them in regards to what they're trying to play out. So stay tuned for the next one in regards to this specific series. I think it'll be an interesting discussion. We'll get to that in a minute. But overall, what are you guys' thoughts on the legacy of this film? Would you change your rating? What are your guys' thoughts? We'll start off with Avalon.
I mean, not really much to change my rating on. I might change it by 0.1 or 0.2 points, but that's only because of a discrepancy in how I rated some things. I realized that my points weren't. I may have misplaced some points somewhere, but it wouldn't be by much.
Okay.
So, and as far as the legacy, I mean, honestly, I consider this one of the better, Marvel movies. Like, this movie was excellent in its time. It still is rewatchable and amazing. As far as superhero movies go, like, this is one of the peak superhero movies out there. Like, if you were to rate all of them and do like a top 10 list, this would be on my top 10 for sure. Maybe even top 5. I haven't made a list like that, so I wouldn't actually know where it would exactly fall, but I'm pretty sure it hit my top 10 somewhere. Um, but I think this movie is an example of what a good superhero movie should be. Like, it should tell its themes and story well, and it should have great characters and a great, like, complete character arcs. This movie has all of that and more. It's very enjoyable, and I'm happy with it. So I think I think the reason it's still remembered today as a good movie, people still think of it as a great superhero movie today. So yeah, I think if there's a movie, if any of the MCU is going to survive for long, this is one of those movies that's probably going to survive longest in my book.
Okay.
At least that's my prediction.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's interesting. Andrew, do you have any other thoughts of your own on this?
I mean, I wouldn't really change my rating at all. I'm happy with where it's at. I didn't give it a solid 9 because there's definitely some things I think could have been done better. But I think as far like an 8.1 is pretty solid rating for a movie.
Oh, that's a spectacular rating.
This is a movie that I would recommend to pretty much anyone. I think that if you are a fan of superhero movies, spy movies, if you're a fan of themes being drawn out in movies, like, it's got all of this. I think as long as you are capable of comprehending a plot, like, I think this movie is a little violent in the beginning, but other than that, I mean, there's no excessive language here. There's no excessive violence. There's no, like, inappropriate content. Like, this, I think, is a great movie for families to watch too. As far as its impact, I will say, strangely enough, I don't think this is a movie that many people like look to as the Marvel movie that they think of as amazing. And I think a lot of times what ends up happening is people think of like Thor Ragnarok or the Avengers movies. This movie, though, for me, easily top 3, if not, I think, the best Marvel movie out there. And top 3 for me is probably going to be Iron Man and Infinity War up there with this one. I think that this movie just does a really excellent job of exploring the hero that is presented, the side characters, the themes, the way that it's approached, the way that they reveal certain plot twists, like all of it's there. Um, I just think it's overall a pretty phenomenal movie. So
Nice. Yeah, that's a fair point. I do think that this movie has a lot going for it in regards to what it brings to the table, especially Bucky Barnes. Great character, great conflict, really interesting stuff going on. So, um, don't have a problem with that. The themes are great. Overall, I would increase my rating a bit, partially because of this discussion. So I'll bring it up to a 6.5. You're welcome, Andrew. And
I'm happy with that.
yeah, it's a lot more than what it had earlier. So that's a 0.7 bump. That's pretty significant. Um, do I think it's going to last the test of time? The problem with a sequel, right, is that a sequel is inherently attached to the movie before it. And so you run the risk of, because it's hard to detach it, for it being lost in the legacy of the previous one. That may make it hard to keep it from being lost. But it's kind of hard to say that in regards to all of the MCU, right? The MCU is this revolving door of movies coming in and out and being released, and TV shows and characters and all this stuff going on. And there's a sense in which, how long will that legacy survive before the MCU dies out on its own? We don't really know. And as long as the MCU is out, there is at least the idea that the original starting pack, right, of the Avengers and the Captain Americas and Iron Mans, all of those initial films probably will have some merit for a while to come. So this one for sure ought to stick around, especially compared to some of the other ones. Will it? I think that relies more on the MCU and how well it sticks around more than anything else. So we'll see. But that's all you got for today, because that is the pod. We will be back, as we always are, next week, and we'll see you back then.